welcome to The Ordinary Show. Amy McCoy, I'm so excited to have you on our show today.
Well, thank you, Meher. I'm actually really excited to be a part of your show today.
Do you know when I met you at the board meeting, I read your bio and I was like, wow, this woman has done a lot. And I was like, I want to get her on my show.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, you never know the work that you do, who it speaks to, until all of a sudden someone says, hey, you're interesting. So I received that and I appreciate that. Thanks.
You're welcome. And your birthday's around the corner, by the way. Happy birthday.
Thank you. You know, another day, year older, I guess. So.
Or a year younger?
Or a year younger, I'll take that.
So tell me, Amy, I know that you grew up in Germany and you were an army brat.
Yes.
So tell me how, and you traveled all around when you were a young girl.
Yes.
So tell me how you grew up and how it shaped your career today.
So I was born here in Georgia. I'm a real Georgia peach, and which is nice. But my parents were in the military, and so we had the luxury of being able to move around to different countries. I spent 12 and a half years in Europe, mostly in Germany.
Wow.
But being able to, move from destination to destination there, duty stations, starting high school in Germany, and then coming back here to the States. Back and forth, it opens your eyes to so much, not just from a cultural standpoint, but even just the way our education system runs, the type of food, things like that. Your just exposure level is completely different. And I completed my high school years here in Clayton County, here in Georgia. So I wish the military had prepared me more for what it was like living in the U.S., as much as it is preparing you and living, in other cultural spaces. Because once I came back to Georgia, it was really a culture shock for me.
What was that culture shock?
Sirens. Clayton County was a little rough in the 90s,
Okay.
and so it was a big difference because of certain redlining, stuff having fair housing, and I'll get more into that,
Absolutely.
throughout our talk. But which I then went off to college in Mississippi, and so I thought Georgia would at least give me a little heads up before I got to Mississippi, but nope. So
what led you to Mississippi?
I actually had cancer as a child.
Oh.
And so the dean of admissions to Russ College happened to be in the congregation at church. And when the military denied me from being able to get access into the military due to pre-existing conditions, the dean of admissions was like, hey, come to Russ College. And so I went to try and make that work. So.
And I know that you left your college in your early years, and now you're actually starting to go, you're back in college in your 40s.
Yes.
So what's the story behind that?
So I left Russ College, unfortunately, at a time where I didn't believe school really was for me. I learned a lot through street smarts at an early age, just due to finances. The military really doesn't pay you very well.
Absolutely.
And so, mom didn't have ice cream money, so I learned to go hustle real early at an early age.
You're a hustler.
I'm a hustler. That's the entrepreneur spirit at heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started off early, learning how to make a way, till all the way to high school. Was working 2 jobs in high school, but still making time for doing extracurricular activities. When I went to college, it was different. My very first week at Russ College, we had an NAACP march, we had a KKK march, we had all kind of things happening, and that was my first week in the backwoods of Mississippi, and I was like, Mom, where did I get dropped off at? And but I learned a lot in the short time that I was there, more about the United States than anything had ever prepared me for, from a racial awakening, so to speak. And so, being American and seeing that I didn't quite identify, not self-identify, but how people looked at me differently. And as a Black woman, having to basically suck it up and just deal with it, and learning how to and create a way for myself.
And space for your own self.
And space for my own self. And so I came back from college and found a different route from the military life because I started working in the prison system.
Yes. And that's where your Metro State Prison story comes in.
Correct.
So yeah, so go ahead. Tell me about that.
I worked at Metro State Prison for a very short time in the sense of I'm an achiever. Like, I learned that about myself at an early age. My parents, they brag saying that they raised me to be an individual and not to wait on no one. It's a gift and a curse because, you know, the dating life sucks, okay? But you learn how to do so much for yourself. And so working in the prison system, I worked my way up. Started doing a lot of boot camp certification courses, and then by age 19, they sent me off to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, to complete the United States Army Drill Sergeant Academy. And so I was one of 50 cadets. 50 cadets went, 13 of us graduated. I was the youngest to complete it.
Wow.
And
that is surely an achievement.
It was, but it came with its pain points too, working at the prison system, and you're working alongside individuals who'd already been in those roles for more than 10 years, but you've got someone coming up and moving fast through the ranks. But after several medical challenges with the amount of stress, because they never paid overtime, and they were always short staffed, so you never really took a day off, and I realized I can make more at McDonald's. And the challenge with it was because I started seeing a repeat of people, and especially those that were former classmates of mine in Clayton County. And knowing the financial background of a lot of the people that grew up in Clayton County during that time. And when I say about redlining, that was because the Olympics was coming in and they were closing down a lot of projects and they were pushing people out of the city. So, and then they were restricting transportation and things like that. So we didn't have a lot of resources out there. So you had a lot of people that wanted to be gangbangers, and, you know, a lot of people that really just didn't simply have because those resources were removed from moving out of the inner city. And so once I started seeing a repeat of people, I realized I'm getting them at the last resort. You know, don't tell them you know me because they'll move you to another prison. You know, don't, you know, and I recognize that I'm not really doing a service in helping them other than just controlling their access. You can't leave, you can't do this. And I think in reality, we need to allow more grace, and that comes through education.
Absolutely.
And so my mom was like, hey, why don't you get into real estate?
So that's where
that's how I got into real estate.
You're just picking my mind each and every topic. I'm like, okay, I was going to just, so how did your real estate journey start?
Yeah,
So the financial crisis?
Yeah, so I actually got in right before the financial crisis.
Okay.
So I left working in the prison system, literally left from going from there to working at the movie theaters, because I was like, anything's got to be better than that, right?
Yeah.
And so my mom had suggested, why don't you get into real estate? So got into real estate and then started learning more about, I'll put it this way, Johnny Isakson, former Congressman Johnny Isakson said, you know, the way America runs is everything is a vertical through real estate.
Absolutely.
And so I didn't recognize until really living through the financial crisis and seeing, and I started in a community I knew nothing about, which was Douglas County, other than the fact when I would drive back and forth to Mississippi, I was always being pulled over in Douglas County, Douglas and Carroll County. So I said, if I'm gonna make an impact on something,
this is the county I'm going to work in.
I'm going to go do it. So I can learn everything I need to know about it in order to help make changes where it's necessary.
Right.
So being involved there now more than 20 years, helped from the political aspect and changing things, to making more equitable opportunities in Douglas County, serving on many different boards.
And I know you're a big advocate of fair housing.
Fair housing is essential for any community to thrive.
Yes.
Most people think it's just an aspiration, but it's an actual law. And we need to make sure that people understand what that law is in order to make more equitable societies. And again, we live in a very entitled, world.
What is that law? Maybe somebody listening to our podcast would know that.
So it's not a sexy topic. Let's be truthful.
Yes.
Nobody wants to hear about discrimination of gender or race or national origin, or the fact that, it wasn't until the 1970s that women had an opportunity finding places to live and Okay, well, now in the 80s, I'm not going to be discriminated against because I have kids. Okay, and now we're into gender identity and sexual orientation, and you know, once you start restricting one person's access or allowing that type of behavior to happen, you're setting a standard that it's okay to infringe on someone else's
Absolutely.
rights, and that's having to bring it back to the forefront of why I do the work I do, because it just ain't right.
And you know, this is a topic we can actually talk about for hours and
Yeah.
hours. And so anything important would you like to say on this before? Anything important you're doing every day and you want everyone to know about it?
So from a fair housing standpoint,
From your life, from a fair housing standpoint.
so I do the work I do because not everyone thinks it's important, but we have to be reminded what's out of sight is out of mind. And so it's constantly being that one to say, and encouraging others. Like, I aspire to inspire. So if I can bring you along to making sure that, hey, you see these policies are being infringed upon, speak up. People are just afraid to speak up these days, and it's the most powerful tool we have is our voice. And
That's
our
beautiful,
voice
yes.
creates action.
Our
and
voice creates action.
And you just have to know how and when to utilize it. And so if I have to use my voice through advocating for fair housing or advocating for women's rights or advocating for whatever it may be, someone else may not know how and just needs the grace to be able to learn it, and they need sometimes help ushering that into them. And so I just found that that's my purpose in life, and so I thank God
And I
for that.
believe you're probably thinking of serving, going to the public sector.
Yeah, so I have, once upon a time, I did run for county commissioner.
Yes.
My fiance had passed away at the beginning
sorry
of
for that.
that. And thank you. And it opened my eyes to a lot, because a lot of people you think may support you, right? And you don't recognize what their agendas are until you're in a position to run for office.
Wow.
And so you have to really evaluate sometimes what relationships are, because some people only think things transactional, and there's really not a true service to it. And so you have to have that level of discernment to be able to say, you know what, I appreciate you, I'm gonna move this way. And that takes time. I've learned, as Congressman John Lewis was my neighbor for 8 years, so he helped me fine tune my advocacy journey. And he would tell me, he'd say, Amy, to see the things you wanna see, the change that you really wanna make, you have to be a part of governing. And until I get that opportunity, because my goal in life will eventually become a senator for the state of Georgia.
Beautiful.
Not just a local senator, like a U.S. senator. And so until that happens, I will continue policy advocating for better, fair housing and equitable housing solutions. And and keep knocking on that door until somebody says, you know what, Amy's got this right. Or, hey, let's fine tune this. Let's work on this. And, until that moment comes, I'll still be right there.
My last question to you is,
Yeah.
what would you tell to your younger self? And what would you like to do before you leave this world? It's a deep one.
It's a real deep one. I'm preparing for a major life surgery come tomorrow. And I wish, and it stemmed from having cancer as a child, I wish someone had given me a real reality check 26 years ago, because now, just like, leaving school back then, I wish I would have stayed in it, but making the decision to go back now, just like having to make the decision of this life surgery tomorrow, it's those things that better late than never. Do what you got to do. And prepare for the next day. And as a child, I would just say, continue to be persistent. Continue striving for what you want, and don't let no one tell you you can't. I had my mother tell me that. My father was not as, gracious in putting that energy there, but continue pouring more energy into those, because people just really don't have enough support of keeping them encouraged.
Yes.
We do so much to keep people discouraged. Like, we celebrate everyone's losses when we
And
really
we're
need
critical
to
and we're judgmental.
very,
And we're very, very less appreciative
yeah.
and grateful.
I think we just need to do better about showing that there is a great side in everyone, and if we pour into more of that energy, we could be doing so many more great things across this country, and would still be a great nation. So,
Thank you, Amy. Thank you
Thank you.
for talking about this amazing topics and being on my show.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.